And we'll get started. So welcome to the penultimate session of our Fall Immigration Forum. My name is Seiko Shastri. I'm a visiting assistant clinical professor of law here at the Binger Center for New Americans. I'm a litigation fellow with the Federal Immigration Litigation Clinic, and it's my great pleasure to invite you to this panel, along with our three additional panelists who, as you'll notice, are joining us remotely today. They are scattered around Minnesota and the country, and so we're very grateful that they're able to join us in any capacity this afternoon. So I want to sort of just set the scene and tone for our panel today. I think some common themes that we've heard in our sessions throughout today, I think sort of fall along two strands. So one of those themes has been kind of this persistent and ongoing needs that are not anything new and have sort of historical and structural roots in terms of kind of the lack of support, the lack of inclusivity, and ongoing needs, particularly legal, for immigrants in this country. And on the other hand, I think we've heard some excellent sessions that kind of get to this being sort of a particularly special moment throughout the country, but I think too in Minnesota, more locally, as a potential for change and as kind of an opportunity to step back and challenge some of the more typical frameworks that we have used to think about to address issues and to try to find solutions to the issues that we're seeing. So this panel is called Beyond Lawyers, Resources for Legal Empowerment. And I'd like to provide just a little bit of a roadmap for what we're hoping this conversation will be today. So one portion, the first portion of our panel, is going to be focused on more specifically identifying and talking about the issue of the lack of legal services for immigration matters generally, and sort of this standpoint that there's always going to be this need and individuals who could use additional legal representation, particularly in immigration issues, and there being, unfortunately, a lack of lawyers able to fully represent individuals on those matters. And then in the second portion of our panel, we'd like to sort of turn more to talking about potential solutions for that. And as part of that, discussing a potential shift in the framework and mentality that lawyers are the way or are the best way to represent individuals in those matters, and what we might do, potential solutions and potential additional representative models that we might use to address that. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end for questions. But with that, I would love to turn it over to our three lovely panelists today. We have Marta Castañón, Michelle Pistone, and Lucy Richardson joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to them. Could you please introduce yourselves, your names, organizations and roles, and then could you speak to get us started just generally about your experience and relationship with immigration work and issues? Ooh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Marta Castañón, and I'm a Department of Justice accredited representative with the Immigrant Law Center here in Moorhead, Minnesota. I've been here for 8 years, and the office in Moorhead has been open for 8 years. Before that, I worked with Southern Minnesota Regional Legal Services for 35 years, so 15 as a secretary and the rest as a paralegal, and that's where I developed my love for working with immigrants and helping them get their status.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lucy Richardson, and I am the Executive Director of Hispanic Outreach of Goodyear County. I am originally from Mexico. I moved to this country 25 years ago with a lot of barriers, and I've been doing this work for this nonprofit for the last 13 years. So I identify myself with a lot of the challenges and needs that the communities have, especially in the rural area, which that's where Red Wing is located. So I am very passionate to do the work that we do. And I thank you for the opportunity to be part of these panelists and to share the needs, the barriers, the challenges, and hopefully we can start doing more of what is needed, coming all the communities together. Thank you.
And hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Pistone. I'm a professor of law at Villanova University, which is outside of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. And I've been at Villanova for 25 years. I actually started here as the director of the clinical program. And for about 2 decades, I ran a clinic in which my students and I provided free legal representation to asylum seekers. And every time I went into immigration court or the asylum office, one of the things I would always make sure to teach my students or to have them notice was how many people were in the court or in the asylum office who didn't have representation. And so a few years ago, I started a new program, which I'll talk about a little bit later. It's called VISTA, and it's designed to build capacity in legal services for people who might not at this point in time be seeking a JD, but who can really use we can really use their help in the immigration system now. So that's my background.
Thank you all for that excellent introduction. So I'd like to get us started by discussing the issue. So if we could sort of flesh out a little bit more specifically the contours of the challenges that non-citizens and immigrants face navigating immigration law. You all are experts and have expertise regarding what this looks like on a national, a regional, and a local level. And Michelle, I'm hoping we can start with you. Could you speak a little bit more to what you see as these issues sort of taking shape on a national level?
Yeah, so, I've been following this really closely for the last few years, and I guess even before that, for the 20 years that I was representing people in the clinic. And we always knew that there was a dearth of legal representation, right? Clinics were really, when we entered and started my clinic at Villanova, I was the only clinical program in the area providing legal representation. And the judges, they were so excited that we were coming in and being able to provide services, because they knew that so many people who might have valid claims, their cases are not being presented in a way that allows the court to actually grant them asylum. And in fact, there was a recent study by the Center for Migration Studies, which is a think tank in New York City, and they found that if we just look at people who are undocumented in the United States, and we take a ratio of the number of people who are undocumented against the number of people who are legal services professionals who provide charitable service to immigrants, the ratio is there's 1,416 undocumented individuals for every one legal services, charitable legal services professional. So there's no way that we can ever meet, and that's, as I said, only the undocumented population. On top of that, we know that there are 1 million cases right now pending in immigration court that are asylum applications. There's an additional 1.6 million in immigration court with other types of claims. And then there's 8 million in front of USCIS right now. So there's a lot of people out there who need representation. And among them are children. There've been recent studies also about the rates of representation of children. And I have statistics here from a report by the Congressional Research Service, and they looked at cases and found that 54% of undocumented unaccompanied children received representation. 46% didn't. And of those, 1,473 represented children received some form of relief, whereas for those who were unrepresented, only 12 children received some kind of relief when they were unrepresented. So we see that the need is significant and that the impact of having a representative is really key. Professors Phil Schrag and Andy Schoenholz from Georgetown did a study years ago called Refugee Roulette, and they too found that people who are represented are like 10 times as likely to get success on the merits as opposed to those who don't have representation. So we know that representation matters. And it matters, particularly in immigration, because the stakes are really high. And also because we're dealing with a population that oftentimes doesn't speak English as their first language. So just being able to interact with the court, they need to have someone help them. They're traumatized, and like as I said, the stakes are huge. So to set the scene, that's significant on a national level. And then, of course, there are pockets of the country where the statistics are even more extreme. Like in Alabama, I think the ratio from that CMS study, the ratio of people who are represented, of charitable legal services representatives as opposed to people who are undocumented is like 1 to 6,000. So there are a lot of pockets in the country where the need is even greater. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Marta and Lucy because they can talk about what's happening in Minnesota.
Thank you. Yes. Marta and Lucy, I would love for you to talk both in the sort of respective parts of Minnesota that you are. What are the challenges and needs that you're seeing, particularly of the immigrant communities that you two are primarily working with?
I guess I'll go first. So the office that I'm at is in Northwest Minnesota, and it borders, the town I live in borders with Fargo, North Dakota. So for my area here, I've seen an increase of people that are coming from Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Peru, Ecuador, a number of different countries. Some of them can't even speak, most don't speak English. There are some who speak very little Spanish, and what I've been seeing with a lot of the Haitians is that some of them speak Haiti Creole, French, and Portuguese because many of them are traveling to South America first, living in Brazil, and then making their way up north. And then there's some that can't speak Spanish. Many of them, they come into the country, they're given immigration documents by ICE and CBP. They're given court dates, and that's where it gets very tricky because for many of these clients, I'm not an attorney. I can't help them with the immigration court process. And what's happening is that they are contacting attorneys in other parts of the country, for example, like California or Florida, that are charging them these very large fees. And when I look at their documents, they oftentimes have a court date for some other in a city in a different state. And what they need to do is to report that change of address. They need assistance in navigating that part of the whole system. Many of them ask me if I can help them apply for employment authorization, and trying to explain to them that they're not eligible for employment authorization until they've gone through the whole asylum process. So it's very difficult to try to explain that to clients, because in the community I'm seen as a resource. So oftentimes I have clients calling me la abogada or la licenciada when I explain to them I'm not an attorney. So there's a great need for immigration legal services that can assist those clients that I cannot assist, because I'm a nonprofit. I work in a nonprofit. There's certain types of cases I cannot assist on, and it'd be wonderful to see more immigration attorneys who are bilingual, bicultural, working in this area, helping these clients. And I don't know what the answer is to begin that process. There are many from the South American countries who speak in different dialects. Sometimes Spanish is not even their first language. So trying to find interpreters, there's such a lack of interpreters in those different areas. So just trying to find answers on how to help them, because to go through that immigration court process, because it's very, it can be very intimidating for the clients. They're afraid of being sent back, trying to understand how this whole process works and trying to explain it in their language. It's very, very difficult. So, Lucy, I don't know if you can add more to that from your area.
Yes, Martha. A lot of what you share is exactly what we're going through in Red Wing. Red Wing is located in southern Minnesota, which is about 50 miles south of the Twin Cities. And around here, we don't have no immigration attorney. The attorneys that we have for civil family matters, none of them speak Spanish either. So we rely a lot on our partners, the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, or Advocates for Human Rights, which most of the time they are out of capacity. So what we have done with the skills that we have, which is mainly the language, when they are asylum seekers and they bring these documents that they need to change their addresses. So little things like that we are able to, but other than that, we have no other place to send them. And around this area in southern Minnesota, like I said before, I've been doing this work for the last 13 years. Our population keeps growing, especially the last 3 years. We've seen a big increase of Central Americans coming here, moving into Goodyear County, especially from Guatemala. So a lot of unaccompanied minors, and as we know, there's already another layer of challenges there with this group of unaccompanied minors. So the lack of legal representation and legal aid is huge. Is huge in southern Minnesota. I've been able to do some partners to come over here and do some educational workshops. It's always as well important to provide this kind of workshops so people learn more in their own language of what are their rights. But definitely a huge lack of immigration attorneys. And the need keeps growing because with our services, the last fiscal year, comparing it with this fiscal year, our clients, 40% more of new clients that we have in our database, and the majority of them are undocumented. So the population around here in Goodyear County is 3.8% for Hispanic Latinos. Comparing it back in 2000, which it was 107. So in the last 2 decades, it's been growing almost 3 times more.
Thank you all for sharing that. So it seems pretty clear that both on a national level and then more locally and regionally, there's absolutely a persistent gap in legal representation for individuals who are seeking and could benefit from guidance on immigration law issues. I'd sort of like now to then shift our conversation to talking about ways we might address that problem creatively and barriers that might be standing in the way of doing that. Michelle, I know that you mentioned and you've spearheaded a program that trains DOJ accredited representatives. Could you talk more about the development of that program, what it does, and why you think that might be a potential model for addressing some of these issues?
Yeah, so believe it or not, there are regulations that have been on the books for like close to 70 years that they're federal regulations that authorize people who are non-JDs to provide legal representation in immigration court and also in front of USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So these regulations are exciting because they provide opportunity. And I think that this is a tremendous, this is the right time for us to think about how to take advantage of this existing authority to really ramp up the number of people who can provide legal representation. So let me step back and tell you a little bit about, they're called accredited representatives. And as we know, Marta is one of them. So the regulations that I'm talking about, remember, immigration is a federal administrative system. So these are regulations that are federal and apply across the country to any cases before USCIS or the immigration courts, because as we know, the immigration courts are part of the administrative system. So under the regulations, someone who has been trained in immigration law and who works at a recognized legal services organization that's been recognized by the Department of Justice as providing low cost or free legal services, if someone works or volunteers at that organization and has the proper training in immigration law and practice, they can apply to the Department of Justice to be through their recognized organization. They can apply for what's called accreditation. They can apply to become an accredited representative. And that accreditation gives them authority to represent clients just like a lawyer would. There are 2 levels of accreditation. The first level is partially accredited representatives. And it's kind of an unfortunate title, but it basically says that the people who are partially accredited can represent immigrants in any kind of application before USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So we're talking about applications for temporary protected status, TPS, for work authorization, like Marta and Lucy were talking about, for visas like U visas, T visas, for adjustment of status, naturalization, asylum, affirmative asylum cases. All of those type of applications are adjudicated by USCIS, and anyone who's partially accredited can do those can represent people in those proceedings. And when I say represent, they're the ones who enter their appearance on the case. They sign as the application as the preparer. They go to the interview at USCIS with the client. They do everything that, if you hired a lawyer, that's what a lawyer would do on the case. It's the same thing. Now, so that's partially accredited representatives who are authorized before USCIS. People who are fully accredited have to prove, in addition to having the training in immigration law, they have to prove that they've been trained in trial advocacy skills. And then when they apply, they can become what's called fully accredited, which authorizes them to represent clients before the immigration courts. So, there are immigration courts around the country, and they could represent someone in any of those immigration courts. Again, entering their appearance on behalf of the client. They're the ones who do the direct exam. They sit at counsel table. They do the argument, the closing argument. They are, the equivalent of what a lawyer would do in immigration proceedings. By the way, there's also authority for fully accredited reps to represent clients on appeal, with their cases on appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals, although I'm not sure that many of them do that. So as of now, today, there are approximately 2,000 accredited representatives nationwide. The vast majority of them are partially accredited representatives. Only about 300 are fully accredited. So 1,700 or more are partially accredited. And they work with legal services, nonprofit legal services organizations, immigrant serving organizations around the country. And they're doing a great job. And a lot of them, like Martha, have been doing it for years and are providing real services in the community. And my goal, so what I did a few years ago was I started the first ever online certificate program offered by a university to train people for these jobs. And I did that because I did all this research about the origins of nurse practitioners and physician's assistants. And I found that there's a lot of similarities between what we're trying to do in the legal space with the origins of those two career paths, both of which started about 60 years ago. And now there are hundreds of thousands of nurse practitioners. And we couldn't even imagine the healthcare system operating without them. So what I'd like to see is us in the legal profession think differently and innovatively about how we provide legal services, and think about incorporating more legal practitioners into the ecosystem. So we have additional layers in the ecosystem where people can provide limited services under these authorities that, again, have existed for decades. And so my goal is to increase the number of accredited representatives from 2,000 to 10,000 in the next 5 years. And I need your help. So if anyone's eager to step in and help me, I would love to connect. And basically, I think that, what I've done through Vista is so great because, remember, I've been a law professor teaching people how to represent people in immigration court and before USCIS for 20 years. So I basically took that curriculum and I put it online. I made it scalable. And now I'm teaching, instead of the 6 students who I was teaching in my clinic, we have this model where students are taking the course from around the country. And it's these modular, like stackable modules that are 1 semester long. Each of them is 1 semester long. If you take all 3 modules, you can apply to the Department of Justice for full accreditation. And in the last academic year, so I launched in the midst of the pandemic in 2020. When I look back and think that I did this in the pandemic, I'm always like surprised, but I did. And now we've had like 600 students go through the program. And this last academic year, they started to get accredited by the Department of Justice. And I just heard from a student recently in Colorado who is a fully accredited rep, and he won an asylum case in immigration court. So for me, that's like, I've proven my concept. This is doable. It's now the issue is how do we scale it? And that's what I'd love to involve you guys in that project. So should I stop here? Is there anything else you want me to talk about before I turn it over, Saiko?
I think that's great for now. Thank you so much, Michelle, for that landscape and the exciting information about the VISTA program, which I hope that everyone here will continue learning about. So I think with that in mind, Marta, it'd be really helpful as you yourself are a DOJ accredited representative, if you could talk to, in keeping in mind sort of the hope that a system like this can be more scalable and to imagine a world where we're able to, similar to what Michelle was talking about, kind of expands how we think about legal representation in immigration beyond lawyers, and kind of includes in this umbrella representatives like yourself. What are some of the sort of practical challenges as well as the benefits of organizations and communities considering expanding legal access through this particular mechanism? You are on mute.
It would be really good to see more accredited representatives in the rural areas. How to meet that challenge, I am not sure, because first of all, the office has to be also recognized as an accredited organization. So not only does the individual have to apply, but the organization also has to apply. And there's certain criteria that they have to meet. I think, you have to have the passion to do this kind of work. So for law students who are graduating, they have to think about, are they willing to move to a rural area and help people with this? They also got to be able to consult with an immigration attorney about certain issues that might pop up, because sometimes one little fact can change a whole case. So having somebody that they can turn to talk to about these issues. But I can definitely see a great benefit on this to be able to help out, with like change of address or renewing a green card, or helping somebody fill out an asylum application with making it clear to the client, I'm only helping you fill it out. Maybe having an attorney review it before it's submitted to the immigration office. So whether or not it requires some knowledge of having a legal background or a legal education, I think it's helpful. But I myself, I don't have a legal education. Everything I learned from working at the two organizations that I worked with. All I can say is that there's a great need, and how to fill the gap, I'm not really sure, but there is a great need of having more people in the rural areas helping those individuals that need to provide information as to how to navigate this process, what to do at immigration court, and how to report a change of address, those kinds of things. You're also talking about funding, for an accredited representative, it has to be a nonprofit organization. So it's not like they can go work with a private attorney and be able to be an accredited representative. They would probably be a paralegal, but not an accredited representative. And how many private attorneys are willing to take on so many cases without charging the clients, or charging the clients a very low fee? So funding and how to pay for those services, that's an issue. So there's a lot of things that need to be explored, and a lot of questions that need to be answered. But there is a great need, and I think Lucy will agree, there's a great need in the whole state. In my area up here, we're seeing more undocumented people that are coming in through Canada. So that is a challenge in itself, simply because they're dealing with the elements of the weather. So I think, yes, it can be done, but there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, a lot of gaps and, you know, who's going to do it and how regional do you want it to be? I mean, it's not like you need an accredited representative in every town, but at least scattered throughout different parts of Minnesota would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Lucy, I want to invite you into this conversation as well now and sort of open it up to the three of you, but trying to sort of center this conversation now more broadly in terms of, well, how do we think about this particularly in Minnesota and with both of your sort of specific expertise about partnership, collaboration, and need in the state? I'm curious if what thoughts you all have about opportunities, particularly in this sort of current moment in the Minnesota State Legislature and beyond, that we might have to sort of think more tangibly about expanding legal empowerment and expanding kind of our thinking on this here in our state.
Yes. Everything what it have been said here is so important, but also, as Martha mentioned it, funding. Funding, I think, is the key. We have great nonprofits such as the IOCM, Advocates for Human Rights, but they don't have the capacity, they don't have the funding. And as small nonprofits like us, we won't qualify, even though we will want to have someone to apply for an accredited representative. So having these amazing nonprofits already in the state doing the work, I think is very important to advocate for legislation to address this gap, and also to address new ways as Michelle was sharing it, these opportunities for new ways of how we can still get the accreditation and being able to help the immigrants in these legal matters. So, in rural Minnesota is a big need, as I said before, but also the importance of community education and outreach it gives a big help to the new immigrants to learn what are their rights, what are those things, that they don't even know what are the rights that they have. So providing this information by partnering with other organizations is also helpful. But I think, again, the key is on more funding and a state level to being able to move forward.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of interesting, it's great to be having this conversation because there's so many people around the country who are trying to think creatively about how to solve this problem, right? It's a real problem. And I think what you guys are talking about in particular, I've heard a lot about how hard it is to recruit people for rural settings. Because even if you get a recent college grad recent law school grad, who's interested in entering the field, they'll go and work in a rural area, usually for 1 or 2 years. But then after they've gotten their experience, they want to move on and go to a city, go back to a city or go to the place where they're from originally. And it's a big drain on the legal services organization that invests a lot in training the recent law school grad, and then they move on after 1 or 2 years. So the thing that I'm finding with Vista is because the curriculum is online and it's accessible from everywhere, we're beginning to see people from rural areas who want to stay in their communities after they take the program. And so to be able to kind of recruit people from those communities where the needs are great, because they're the people who want to serve their own community. give them an education which is online and accessible, and then have them continue to work in their own communities. In fact, the person who I mentioned earlier who won that asylum case is a great example. He's from rural Colorado. He said the closest immigration lawyer is 4 hours away. He started his own nonprofit. So he started a recognized organization in his community. He's the accredited rep, and he won that asylum case. So I think that there are models out there, like people are beginning to think creatively and innovatively about, how to address these real issues. The other thing that I'm seeing in Vista is that students are coming from all sorts of areas with all sorts of backgrounds. And I was actually really surprised before I launched the program. I kind of didn't know who would show up as a student. But we're finding that they range in age. The students in the program range in age from 18, 19 as the youngest, all the way up to, we had a student who was 86 years old. And most of the students are kind of equally divided in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so some are recent college grads who want to do this work and maybe are considering law school, but they want to get their feet wet and learn about immigration law before they go to law school. Some of them, I think, will eventually go to law school in that category, but some are going to become accredited reps and do that as a career. We're also finding people who are coming back into the workforce, maybe after raising children. We have some people who are retirees who want to do this work after having worked in other fields. In fact, earlier today, I was speaking to someone who was a physician and a surgeon, and now after working in that field for 30 years, wants to be able to become an accredited representative. We've had academics also take it because they want to start programs in their own schools where they can start providing representation. So I think that while there are challenges, and I definitely agree that funding is a huge issue, and that's where the creativity, I think, has to come in. I'm working with an organization called the Resurrection Project in Chicago, and they, talking about, funding opportunities, they got funding from the city of Chicago and also from the state of Illinois to start a fellowship program where they're training people Black and brown people who are immigrants themselves or children of immigrants, to become accredited representatives, hoping to build capacity in the state. And the first cohort, we taught them last year, we graduated 22 students. Many of them have already gotten accredited and are working in legal services organizations. And then we have another 20 students in the program this year. And it seems like it's going to be something that we can continue to grow in the future as well. So there are models also for innovative, like fundraising at the state, the city, the local levels to ramp up capacity, because the states and the cities are seeing that there's a huge need. And of course, the whole system operates much better when people are represented as opposed to when they're not. When they get work authorization, they can start working legally and provide for their family, and so the city doesn't have to provide for them. I mean, there's so many reasons that we need more capacity here. And I guess I just say one other thing, that recognized organizations, there are some creative models out there as well. Like I saw a group of public libraries that applied for recognition, and they have people who are working with the public library who are accredited representatives and providing legal services. I've also seen a union that had accredited representatives. So just as a way to think outside the box, we're trying to be creative here about how to expand capacity and maybe get resources from places that we might not have always looked, but that might be interested because of the huge need right now. So I'll stop there for now.
That's great. Thank you so much, Michelle. I think that gives certainly me a lot to think about as well. Lucy and Martha, do you have any thoughts or reactions to what Michelle was saying, or additional thoughts or observations about what we might consider here in Minnesota related to that?
Well, one of the thoughts that I had was is for, in the Twin Cities there, you've got a number of different law schools. It would be great for those who are interested in immigration law to be able to come to the more rural areas, set up a workshop, and collaborate with the nonprofits in that area, and do like a 101. Okay, you've got immigration court coming. This is what you do. This is, kind of do little 1-hour consults. But for those students to come to the rural areas instead of the clients having to travel to the Twin Cities. Collaborate with the local community colleges, because some of them have paralegal programs, and I'm not sure if there's an immigration law component in there. Up in Grand Forks, North Dakota, which is an hour away, there's a law school, and I'm not sure. I know at one time a few years ago in the past, they used to have an immigration component, and I don't think they no longer do, but it'd be nice to have that back. But for those students coming to the rural areas and having like a little workshop and meet with people and give them some basic information as to what their rights are, and help them like do a change of address online or whatever needs to be done. But I would like to see something like that. And maybe it will motivate the law students to think, well, maybe, I do want to live in a rural area, and to kind of put that thought in their minds for the future that they might want to go to a rural area. So those are my thoughts.
Great. Thank you. Lucy?
Yeah, the other thought will be to work more intentionally with nonprofits in the Twin Cities areas to come to the rural area at least once every 3 months. Just to I understand that coming more frequently that will be out of their capacity, but to intentionally do something like that, because around here, we really feel like a desert. Even though we're not that far away from the cities, but it really feels like it because there's lack of resources, and being able even to come up with a way of finding a small funding through our local givers here in the community to help out. That could be another way as well, because we understand the lack of funding. But just to come up with creative ways of intentionally, collaborate more in the rural area with nonprofits like us, and with Martha's organization as well, and many others out there too.
Yeah, just to throw another idea out there, we were able to get funding for scholarships for people to take VISTA through a local foundation that was interested in workforce development. So they weren't necessarily, they ended up being very interested in the immigration part of it, but we originally went to them because of the workforce development side, like giving opportunities for career paths for people who really, are uniquely situated to do this work, like people who have an immigrant background, lived experience, language, cultural competency, etc. So that's just something to kind of throw out there as an idea. And it was very successful. And then they introduced us to another foundation that's now interested in trying to build capacity in a town that's close to us, possibly through the students who got the scholarships to take VISTA. So that's one thing. The other thing is the American Bar Association is partnering with us to provide scholarships for Afghans to take VISTA because there's such a huge need for legal representation for the Afghan community, particularly those who were evacuated from Afghanistan, the 80,000. And so we're training up people who have competencies, who are culturally competent, who are from Afghanistan, and speak Pashto and Dari, which are really hard languages to find among the general lawyer population. So I think it's interesting because this was an opportunity, like seeing that problem about representing Afghans, then led to, in this case, the American Bar Association stepping up to provide funding for scholarships. So it could also be that, like there are other populations in your community, like, Lucy, you were saying that Guatemalans are moving into your community in record number. Like maybe there's some way to figure out how to get the attention of people who care about that particular community to see if they'll look at it either as a workforce development thing or as a way to provide services to that unique community. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Great, thank you so much. I think this gives us all a lot to think about. And at this point, I'd like to turn to you all, who hopefully are not too undercaffeinated, to ask a couple of questions. If you have any, both to learn about anything you might be interested in about what's going on in broader Minnesota and needs that we might have as a state, or more specifically about the VISTA program and what Michelle mentioned as a potential vision for what our profession could be moving towards. So I invite you all to ask questions. Yes, sir. There's going to be a mic runner, so please wait until they come to you.
Hello, my name is Nasir, and I came from Afghanistan, actually within those who evacuated back from Afghanistan. Since 1.5 years, I'm in Minnesota, actually 2 years. I'm trying to find a way to go to one of the systems. I go in even 2 times I came here in this compound. I get an email, I send another email, then I get another email. I just send, and I'm playing with the emails, but still I was not able to find the right path. So where is that location I could go and start? I can speak all 3 languages spoken in Afghanistan, and of course English, you see, so I can speak. And that's all. Thank you. And I learned a lot today, actually, a lot. So today I took a day off from my part-time job just to join here to see what is going on in Minnesota, the Minnesota state. We have a snow, by the way, in Afghanistan. Don't worry.
Wow.
So I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you thought it was worth taking a day off from your part-time job. I know you're probably supporting not only a family here, but probably people back home as well. And so, Nasan, I'm glad to meet you. So one thing to kind of throw out there is that we do offer scholarships for people to take the VISTA program that are offered through Villanova. The ABA scholarships for this year have already been filled, but the scholarships that are offered through Villanova University are available. And if you go to the VISTA website, and I'm sure Psycho can get that to you. Right on the home page of the VISTA website on the right-hand side, there's a link to the application for scholarships. If you want to start in the January term, I think the deadline is coming up pretty quickly. So I would recommend you look at it as soon as possible. But if you don't make it for that deadline, there's another one coming up in a few months. And I hope to see you in the program. It sounds like you'd be a great advocate.
There you go.
Thank you. All right, next question.
Hello, my name is Rose Grings, and I am a retired immigration attorney. And this sounds like a wonderful program, and I I just would like to clarify one thing. It seems as though increasing capacity would be a great thing, but then don't they have to get hired? The accredited representatives need to be hired by like a nonprofit organization, or they can volunteer. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because it does seem like that might be a hurdle as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was referring to when I referred to the funding and the opportunities, like to think about state or other types of funding from foundations to fund those positions. So yes, people, in order to be recognized, I mean, accredited, you have to either work or volunteer at a organization, a legal services organization or an immigrant serving organization. And we're working on trying to think about how to build out the ecosystem of support, including getting people like you, Rose, if you're interested, to be mentors for accredited representatives as they start transitioning into these jobs. I think it's a great opportunity for a retired lawyer who has a lot of experience, but might not be in a position to take on cases right now.
Thank you. All right, next question.
Mine is a comment more than a question. I'm way back here if you don't see me. Thank you. I wanted to commend the panelists for starting to think in a way that I think would eventually solve this problem. The reason I raised my hand is I think the earlier panelists talked about having a scarcity mentality. We are always thinking about what we don't have, and we forget about what we already have. I'm speaking as someone who was trained outside of this country. Fortunately, I went through all hoops. I'm licensed, I practiced, but I know hundreds, probably thousands, if you went nationwide, of people. I hope you can understand my English. Can you? People who speak English with an accent like I do, but are competent, but their skills that would be helpful in this context, because they have a JD, they have an LLM, but because they can't be licensed in their state, they are working as janitors and CNAs, which is okay. But how nice would it be if we build a way to recognize those people, put them in the pipeline, have them work through programs like VISTA, and then eventually, if they want to, qualify as attorneys like myself. That's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea. And in fact, we do have several students in VISTA today who are lawyers from other countries. Right now, I'm teaching 2 lawyers who used to practice in Venezuela. We have another person who used to be a lawyer in Colombia. And a lot of the people from Afghanistan, there's so many legal services professionals, including judges who had to flee the country. And so what better way I agree with you, like what better way to take advantage of their educational background, their skills, their cultural competence, their language abilities, their understanding of legal systems, than to give them this capacity, because the alternative is for them to try to get LLMs, but that's very expensive and time consuming. And then, they have to pass the bar. Here, you don't have to pass the bar.
All right, next question. Anna?
Hi, so my name is Anna Patratz Acosta. I actually teach across the river at Mitchell Hamlin in St. Paul. And I was going to say, Michelle, as you might know, we're also kind of a pioneer in blended learning education. So the program that you've put together sounds really amazing and innovative, and it's exciting to hear about it. I was curious, how long is the course? And do you have any, is it completely asynchronous, or do you have like in-person component, like office hours or that sort of thing? I'm just curious for pedagogical reasons. And then also for people who complete the program, is there any mentorship or pairing with attorneys who can be a supervising attorney when they're working as accredited representatives? Because I understand that that's another component of the accredited rep program, is that you usually have to have some sort of a relationship with a licensed attorney to kind of provide mentorship or supervision in certain instances.
Excuse me. Hi, Anna. Yeah, so I do know about Mitchell Hamline, and I totally have been following you guys from like before you even applied for the online JD stuff. And I agree that it's so innovative and exciting. And really what I've done in the program is take advantage of what I learned from Learning Sciences and also from about formative assessment and how people learn best, and try to incorporate all those lessons into the design of the curriculum. So it's actually designed as 3 stackable modules, and each module is built, 14 weeks divided up into 2 7-week sessions with 1 week in between, in part because I know from my research that in online programs, it's better to have shorter courses rather than longer courses like a 14-week semester. So we have these 2 7-week sessions in the module, and then at the end of the module, students earn a certificate. So, and they're stackable. So the first certificate is in immigrant accompaniment, and that curriculum focuses a lot on why people migrate and how to work effectively with immigrants, cross-cultural understanding, interviewing, and those kind of like fundamental skills to develop empathy and understanding and rapport with clients. And like I said, that curriculum ends in a certificate, and there are people who could use that certificate to then engage in immigrant accompaniment. If people go on to Module 2, then that focuses on the law that usually people would need to know if they're representing people before USCIS. So it's all those visas that I spoke about earlier, like the T visa, the U visa, naturalization, adjustment of status, citizenship, temporary protected status, all sorts of affirmative applications, including asylum, that we deal with in Module 2. And that also ends in a certificate in immigrant advocacy. And there are a lot of people who take Module 1 and Module 2, and then they apply for partial accreditation. And some of them come back for Module 3, which again is a stackable credential. And that focuses on trial advocacy skills and motion practice and things that you need to do in immigration court. I worked with people who from NITA, National Institute for Trial Advocates, in designing that curriculum, and also some retired immigration judges. So it's really focused on trial advocacy, opening statements, closing arguments, storytelling, direct exam, motion practice, working with experts, all the things that people would need to do if they were representing people in immigration court. And there are a lot of people who take all 3 modules and apply for partial accreditation. There are people who take all 3 modules and apply for full accreditation. And it incorporates a lot of formative assessment. So in every single week of, their units, week-long units, in every single unit, there's probably 5 or 6 opportunities for students to put their learning to work and to get feedback from an adjunct professor. So we have a team. I'm working with 8 adjunct professors who provide feedback to the students on a weekly basis, and also meet with the students in at least 1 hour a week, and a facilitated discussion. So most of the course is asynchronous, and students do it at their own pace. There's a lot of opportunities for them to There's discussion boards, and there are other technologies that we use in order for students to give feedback to each other. And then there's a weekly in-person, in-person over Zoom, synchronous facilitated discussion. And then I also, on a regular basis, host what I call Hot Topics in Immigration Law, which is available to anyone in the VISTA community. And they're with experts talking about, a topic like what's happening at the southern border or a particular social group in asylum cases or things like that. So I hope that answered all the elements of your question. I think I did.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, I think we have one more. We have time for one more question, then we'll end. But final question, please.
I have a really quick question. Does a VISTA student have to be associated with a nonprofit at the time they take the courses, or do people take the courses and then present their coursework, for instance, in application with a nonprofit?
Yeah, so most of the students who come to VISTA are not formally associated with a nonprofit. And one of the things we do in the curriculum is we have a lot of assignments that get them to meet the organizations in their community so they can start making connections so that they can find a place where they'd either volunteer or work. So that's actually built into the curriculum as the professional development element. And I mean, that's what we're finding, especially the people who are coming to us. Those are the folks who are not already affiliated with organizations. There are other organizations that provide training. It's not as robust as the VISTA program, in part because a lot of the people who do those programs are already in legal services organizations. So a 40-hour training would be sufficient for them. Mine's a lot more. The students who take VISTA say that they work about 10 to 15 hours a week. It's pretty robust, rigorous. And the students say that they can hit the ground running when they graduate.
Great, thank you. All right, we're at the end of our time for this session. If you have additional questions for our panelists, I know it's hard to be able to come up and not speak to them directly, but I'd be happy to take down additional questions or connect you to Michelle, Lucy, and Marta if you have any additional comments or questions. But for now, please join me in thanking our panelists for their wonderful talk today.